everybody. Welcome back to the Covenant Eyes podcast, where we are all about empowering you to live with integrity in a digital world rooted in biblical truth. Today, we are so excited to have a guest that has never joined the Covenant Eyes podcast, but we are excited to have her. Her name is Amber Rose. She is a vibrant voice in the Christian community, and she's often called the Religious Hippie. I'm super excited to get into that. This episode is going to be a lot of fun. I've got Theo joining us from Covenant Eyes. Hey, Theo, how's it going?
Karen, it's going great as always. It's an honor to co-host alongside you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about our conversation. And Amber, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this topic and to talk to you guys and just dive right in.
Awesome. Well, Amber, for our listeners that are not familiar with who you are and what you do, can you share a little bit about your background and also how'd you get that name, Religious Hippie? That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. So I'm Amber Rose, the Religious Hippie. My ministry's main focus is to help people who have fallen away from the church to find their way back, because I was that person. In 2019, I found my way back to the Catholic Church after leaving it for almost a decade. I was around 11 when we left, and I came back when I was about 19 or 20. And I didn't have, this was pre-COVID, we didn't have, social media the way we do now with TikTok, the way it blew up. And we have all these, Catholic content creators who have come up and are amazing. I only had really Catholic Answers, Trent Horn, and I love them. They were great. Father Mike Schmitz, oh my gosh, so amazing. But I wanted to know what it was like to be a teenager, a young adult in the Catholic world, trying to find your way back, and I couldn't find any relatable sources. It was all apologetics. It was all about how to defend your faith, which I was like, this is amazing. I need this. But when I looked for interviews of young adults who were passionate about their faith, maybe they fell away, maybe they went through some things that I went through, and I just didn't find anybody. And this was before COVID, so before all the, Catholic content creators took off on TikTok and then subsequently on other platforms. So I decided, I was like, well, if I can't find them, maybe I'll become one of them. And I decided to just post, a video, and I didn't really know how it was going to go. I didn't expect anything crazy, but I was looking for community. I was looking for camaraderie, and I wasn't finding it. And then that video basically blew up overnight, and thousands of people started following me. I started getting an influx of people who were like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same boat. I had no idea I wasn't alone. Like, I am also where you are. And then I realized, oh crap, I don't know much about my faith. And so I started diving deeper into my faith. And as people came to me with their questions, I started learning a lot more about the faith through just, my outreach and the community that I was kind of building on there. And so the name came from so it's funny because when I was in high school, I was called hippie because of my crazy hair and because of my flowy pants. And, I was crazy. I was also into New Age occultism, but that's, it was short-lived, but I was definitely into like some of that stuff. And so my friends called me hippie in high school. And when I came back into my faith, the friends who did stick around were like, well, I guess you're now like the religious hippie, like you're now like religious, right? And so that kind of just sparked this whole thing. And I was like, well, I guess I have to call myself something. And I called myself the religious hippie. It was supposed to be a temporary name, completely temporary. But I tried changing it once and people had a fit. They were just like, why did you change it? You can't change it. Like, that's a name. It was great. So anyway, it stuck, and it was all an accident, but I asked God, I was just like, if this is something you want from me, let it be done. But if it's not, take it away from me. Because, social media had been a vice for me for so long. And he said, to me, he said that I'm going to make something horrible beautiful, and I'm going to turn your vice into a virtue if you're strong enough and if you are willing to follow me and do this for me, not for your own glorification. And so I try to uphold that every day, and it's hard, very hard, but I do my best. So yeah.
That is cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that story. And thank you for sharing the journey too. I love how you were able to redeem, what was kind of used as, you were a hippie kind of mindset when you were in high school and kind of going down a path of darkness, New Age, that kind of thing. And you redeemed that for God's glory. I love that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, do you still wear the flowy pants and all the fun things, or did you let that go?
No, I definitely do. I have my bell bottoms. I have my peasant tops and everything.
Oh,
Unfortunately, it's not like the most aesthetic thing ever. I definitely still like it, so I wear it, but posting it, people are like, somebody told me I was promoting drugs by dressing that way, and I was like,
Oh.
that's weird. But okay. So now I just, sweatshirts and t-shirts and stuff, but
Nice.
I do definitely still have a very hippie flow to me if you meet me in person, for sure.
That's cool.
One of the things is that for Covenant Eyes, we are about living with integrity on the internet. And you, Amber, have you're all over social media, but you've also talked about how social media has downsides. So, how do you balance the good sides of social media and the risks?
Yeah, I think that that's a really hard one, especially today when the social media, world is so saturated with Catholic content creators, which is great. But there has been a lot of infighting too, and a lot of problems amongst Catholics online, dragging each other through the mud, just, oh, I disagree with this person, so I'm going to completely unfollow them and like block them and whatever. There's there's a huge lack of humility and prudence online. And social media kind of cultivates that. And so for me, being able to protect my peace is the most important thing. Not just my peace, but also my privacy. I only share as much as I'm willing to share. I don't share out of the necessity of getting views or like, oh, this is going to be shocking, so people are going to want to, view like the family vloggers or, whatever, clickbait and things like that. I don't try to go towards that, but I try to talk about things that I'm very passionate about and things that I feel like young adults are really struggling with in today's world. And unfortunately, that comes with a lot of backlash, which means I have to protect my peace. I have to protect my privacy. I have to make sure that I'm putting God first and that He is the one that's carrying me through this. Because if I'm doing it for my own gratification, my own glorification, it's not, it's short-lived. It's very temporary. Because if I'm basing my worth based off of what people say about me, that is going to be like, oh, I love her one day. Oh, she's the worst the next. Oh, I love her this day. Cancel her, So for me, it's like I have to get my strength from God, truly. And I do that through setting limits with my social media. Most of my social media is actually scheduled. People don't realize that, but I take month-long breaks from social media at one time because I have to. Because if I am sucked into this world, if I am so deep into this world, I get sucked into the vortex of just black-pilled people and, feeling like it's okay to admonish someone online without actually, I don't know, trying to get their perspective. Now, there are people online that do need, some public, I guess, being called out in public, sure. But it should always be done with a type of charity. And, even when Jesus called out the Pharisees, it was still in charity in a way, to keep them and to prevent them from going deeper into their pride and their ways. And so, unfortunately, it can be very hostile online. And so for me, just being able to refocus, make sure that my phone isn't the first thing I grab in the morning, make sure my Bible or, my prayers are the first thing I grab in the morning. My rosaries, always having Catholic art or something around to remind me to pray. And if I do find myself getting riled up online, and this is the best quote I think I've ever been given, was, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. If you can't handle what's going on online, it's causing you your peace, you're getting riled up about it, you have to go to confession because of how much you're online chronically or because of what you say online uncharitably, etc., take a break. It's really not that big of a deal, and I think people are addicted. And so being able to prioritize your faith and constantly just ask God, is this even something I should be doing? Because I don't believe everybody should be on social media or needs to be on social media, at least to the extent that most Catholic content creators are, like myself or Trent Horn. I think it takes very specific people. You have to do it for the right reasons. You can't go into this being like, oh, I want to be a Catholic content creator because finances, like I want to get paid, or, oh, I want people to see how much I'm doing for the church. It really doesn't come to that. And if you ask the big Catholic content creators today, most of them started their ministries just because they wanted to help people. It wasn't for self, glorification. It wasn't for money or anything like that. It was, there was a lot of humility that went into that decision, and God obviously was at the center of that. So For balance, honestly, I just schedule a lot of posts, make sure prayer comes first, make sure I don't, overdo it online too much, especially when I'm sick, because that's all I feel like doing. And yeah, it's really simple things, but easier said than done, for sure.
And it's a calling, right? It's a calling. It's a kind of lowercase v vocation. Like, okay, I'm called to be
Yeah.
here and do this. Not all of us are, but you are. So, but when you have a calling, you still have to proceed and live it out in the best way possible. So,
Yeah.
I think those are
Doing
some
my
great
best.
tips.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you brought up some really good points too, because oftentimes, there are, and I think we're inundated with this online, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or even on YouTube. There are so many content creators. I actually read a study, it was probably a couple months back, that being a YouTube influencer is like the number one and number two jobs for young people. Like
Yep.
when asked in high school, what do you want to be when you grow up? Not doctors, not lawyers. They want to be YouTube influencers and
Yep.
content creators. And so there's this whole dynamic of young people that, they see the personalities out there and, they want I think they're going after it for the wrong reasons. They see the money, the fame, the notoriety. But it actually is a lot of work. And most of the really high level influencers that are out there for the church, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, they really do have good boundaries put in place. You talked about that. And I think that's something that people don't realize, that they're not living online. A lot of times they have people that manage their social media profiles for them, because they know the danger of getting sucked in, because, all of these platforms are designed to be addictive. That's how they keep people coming back. They don't offer their services free because they care about your well-being. They offer them free because they build in behavior modification techniques to get you coming back, so that advertisers can get in front of these people and they can sell ad space and make money. So, I mean, if we really look at the intent of social media, I think that's important. But let's talk a little bit about, in your story, you left the church and came back. Let's talk a little bit about that journey, and talk about your reversion story and how your transformational encounter really led you back to where you are today.
Yeah. So I was born and raised a cradle Catholic. My dad raised us in the traditional Latin Mass. And I mean, we went to the Novus Ordo too. There was one that I did, catechism at. So I was there as well. So I got the best of both worlds, basically. I got, to go to the Novus Ordo, and I got to go to the TLM. But I hated Mass. I hated everything about it. I hated how it was like this hour of just doing nothing. And, I'm short. I'm a little kid. I'm literally just looking at butts, because it's like I'm at a certain height. I can't see anything. And we always sat in the back. And we always went to the earliest Mass possible, which was, surprise, 7:30 in the morning. So little me was like not thrilled about this. I'm like, not only do I have to sit in silence for an hour in a church and stare at people's either heads or butts, but I also have to be quiet. I can't do anything, and I have to not fall asleep either, which is also very hard to do, might I add, at a low Latin Mass, because there's silence and it's dark and nobody's talking. So I didn't like it growing up, and because of that, I didn't really pay attention in catechism class. I got my first communion, I got my confirmation, and I goofed off the entire time, never really absorbed anything that was given to me, despite going to one of the most beautiful parishes and going to some of the most informed catechism classes. I think some people would have died to go to those catechism classes, but unfortunately, I just didn't recognize it as something that was important. I didn't realize that it was something that was I guess important for my soul. I just didn't really care. And I hate saying that, but it's true. As a little kid, I didn't care. 2011 rolled around and my family fell away from the church because of the sex scandals that were coming out. I think a lot of people didn't know how to handle those at the time, unfortunately. And my family was one of those. And so to me, I was like, great, yes, like this is perfect because now I can sleep over with my friends into Sundays. I don't have to go to mass. I don't have Catholic guilt. I don't have to go to confession. I don't have to any of these giant responsibilities that were really keeping me safe at the time, but to me, I viewed as restrictions, were finally gone in my eyes. And shortly after that, I think only a couple months after that, I was introduced to pornography by a peer of mine at an orchestra group that I attended when I was younger. And I really liked this boy. I thought he was smart. I thought he was handsome. I thought he was interested in me for all the right reasons. He gave me attention. And the pornography kind of just came on slowly. It was more of a grooming type of situation where I was very young. He was only a little bit older than me, not by much, but he was groomed by a girl at his school. And he told me about that. And I was just like, what does that mean? What is grooming? What is any of this stuff? Because I'm 11, almost 12. I don't know these things. And so then over time, he slowly introduced me to certain words. He introduced me to sexting. He introduced me to different things that I shouldn't have known about at the time. And I didn't really still understand. I knew that this behavior was expected of me from him and that I liked him. And so I was going to do this because I liked him. But unfortunately, it was just something that became an 8 to 9 year long addiction where I didn't realize why I was doing it or why I, felt the need to do it. But it was like a stress relief. And it was something that I just kind of kept with me. It was a secret. Nobody else knew about this. I was very good at hiding everything. And when I got my own phone, because my sister and I were actually sharing a phone at the time, and somehow I got away with this, and I don't know how I got away with, sharing a phone with my sister and also doing that. I have no idea. But I did. I was very, very sneaky. I was able to get away with it. And because I really was craving affirmation and I was craving validation and just love, I guess, this is what I thought it was supposed to be like, because this is what the world tells you love is like. Sex outside of marriage, drama, just doing inappropriate things in general, like dressing immodestly, like all of that lust is just a part of relationships. And if they're not lusting after you, then there's a problem. And so from that, and then also from viewing pornography for years, I started learning what, basically from the women in pornography, what you're supposed to look like to be appealing to the male gaze. And so I started starving myself to be skinnier. I was 12. I was already skin and bones. Like, I'm a child. And I was like, oh, I need to be skinnier. I need to be this. I need to look like Britney Spears. I need, to wear these scandalous clothings. I need to draw attention to myself. And I still didn't know why I was doing it. I was chasing validation. I was chasing these feelings, but it always left me empty. And so I kind of went through this for 8 years. I developed an eating disorder. I was, depressed. I was anxious. Self-harm was a huge part of it. And during this time, I was also homeschooled. So there's that. And I was in a few different homeschool groups, but in one specifically, there were always rumors going on about me about, oh, she's, an SLUT, she does this stuff. Even though it wasn't necessarily true what they were saying, it still had some truth to it because I knew I was still, not a virtuous person. And so I kind of just got a lot of trust issues and I started shutting everybody out as a teenager would do. And then in every relationship I ever had, one after the other, the main consistent thing was always either pornography, sexting, or them only valuing me for how skinny I was, what my body looked like, etc. And so I quickly learned that validation came from how I looked. And so it made me a very shallow person because I started putting more effort into how I looked as opposed to things I knew, skills I had, my personality. And I would just mold myself into what other people wanted me to be in that moment as opposed to who I really was or what my actual viewpoints were. So I became a mask of a person. And by the time I was 19, I had no idea who I was. I was like, I don't have a personality. I don't have, I don't know what I'm specifically supposed to do. I don't know why I feel so empty when I'm doing everything that everybody wants me to do. Why do I still feel this way? And so it all came to a head when I was probably, it was in the summertime sometime, and I was in bed and I was having like the worst depression episode of my life where I couldn't get out of bed for days. I was just laying there. And I remember rolling over, and on my wall, I have a calendar, and it was Pugs and Donuts, might I add. So it was like a really cute calendar. But I rolled over and I saw that it was Sunday. And in my head, I was just like, Sunday, okay, I have homework to do. I have this to do. I have everything to do. And I don't know exactly what it was, if it was, the Holy Spirit or Our Lady or what it was, but it was kind of like this nudge of, remember when you were younger? And I remember latching onto this memory of just like us going to mass as a family, and afterwards we'd get brunch. But even though I didn't like mass necessarily as a child, I liked feeling like I had some sort of foundation, like the pillars were there at that time. And I'm like, well, I've tried everything else. The last thing I can really do is go to mass. So I somehow gathered enough courage to get up, put on the least scandalous thing I owned, because at that time I had a closet full of scandal, and I drove myself to mass. Nobody knew. My parents didn't know. My friends didn't know. My sister didn't know. I just took myself to mass, and I walked in. I sat in a back pew because that's where we sat when I was a kid. And I was almost like immediately like sandwiched in by people who were like filing in for mass. And I was just like, great. Okay, that's great. Like now I can't leave if I want to. And I know God kind of did that on purpose, corralled me, so to speak, so I wouldn't get up and leave. But I decided, I was like, from my anxiety telling me like, you don't belong here, and the devil obviously lying to me saying like, people are judging you, they know what you've done, and someone could simply just like glance at me and I'd be like, oh my gosh, they know what I did. Like oh no. And so I was sandwiched in. Couldn't leave, but I decided, I'm like, I have to get out of here. So during communion, when people get up to go receive, I'm going to ditch, because, that's I've seen people do that before too when I was a kid. I'm like, people would just receive communion and leave, which is also not a good thing. That's a different topic. But I was like, I'll just do that. Nobody will notice, like it'll be fine. So eventually, I'm like just in my head at this point, just thinking like I don't belong here, etc. And eventually consecration starts, and the priest lifts the host for transubstantiation, and everything freezes. And I remember kind of looking around and being like, okay, well, this is a new low for my mental illness, but I guess I'm having a psych moment. And I remember looking around, everything's frozen. Nobody's talking. The priest is frozen. But it's like Jesus is alive, in the Eucharist, where there's this pulsating light. And I heard him say in my heart, he said, "Do you trust me?" And I was just like, okay, psychic breakdown, like, let's go. Okay. But I was just like kind of in a moment of disbelief, I guess, because God had always been something so distant to me, something that I just thought was something that people imagine to make themselves feel better, as opposed to an actual person, an actual, loving God. And I said, no, I don't trust you. And I started listing off all the reasons why I didn't. Introduced to pornography, my depression, my mental illness, all my friends turned against me. Like, why would you do this to me? Why would you allow me to go through this? And he kept asking, he's like, well, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And I was like, no. And I kept fighting him on this. And, at one point, the more I reflect on the story and the more that I kind of get back into that mindset, I remember having a moment of clarity where I realized God didn't leave me. I left him. And he had been trying this entire time to bring me back over the course of 8 years. And I had to take some responsibility for the decisions I made, not what was done to me, because I can't control that. I was a victim in many ways, but now I'm an adult. I have to take responsibility for what had happened to me and how I respond to that now. And in that moment, I understood that God didn't put me through that. We live in a fallen world where sin runs rampant, and there are other hurt people who hurt people. And that wasn't necessarily my fault at all. But at the same time, now it is like this behavior that I've cultivated is my fault, because why am I hurting myself even more? Why am I giving my abuser that satisfaction of, instead of healing and taking care of myself, why am I torturing myself? Why am I now becoming the abuser of myself? And I had that realization, and God just kept asking, he's like, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And eventually I said, I'll try. And I always describe him constantly asking over and over again. I describe that as him taking like a little chisel and a pick and kind of like chipping away the stone cold parts of my heart, because I had built so many walls around my heart at that point, from the rumors that were spread to people who broke up with me, who just used me for, sexual gratification, whatever it might be. And he cracked through. And so after that, I stayed after consecration, of course. And I just had like this moment of weight being lifted off my shoulders. But then I also felt a different type of weight. I felt pressure, like a hug from a mother, a very maternal hug from Our Lady, saying like, you did it. You're back. Like you had to go through what you had to go through, but you're here. And my son wants you back, and now you're back. And so Our Lady, when I didn't realize this until, after my conversion, but when a couple weeks before maybe it was a couple months, I don't really remember, but before my reversion, I lost my childhood rosary. When we left the church, I lost my childhood rosary. I had no idea where it went, didn't know where it was. Like it was a beautiful amber colored rosary, which I have on my desk over there, but no idea where it went, just disappeared. And then a couple weeks before my reversion, I found it on my dresser, and I told my mom, like, oh my gosh, you found my rosary. Like, this is great. And it didn't really mean anything to me, but it was like, symbolic and nostalgic and whatever. And she was just like, no, I didn't. And I was like, oh, well, okay, well, it just showed up on my desk. So I don't, like, somebody had to put it there, and nobody put it there. So I was like, well, that's weird, but whatever. So I hung it up on my wall, and I was just like, I'll just put that there. And then, 2 weeks later, I had my reversion. So I definitely think it was Our Lady, giving me a little nudge and being like, hey, remember the rosary, remember my son loves you, remember, these important things. And after I had my reversion, I went to my car, and people usually have like a breakdown, like they cry. I started laughing. I had joy that I had not felt in over almost a decade. An 11-year-old depressed. Like, unfortunately, it's not that unusual these days for kids to be depressed. But at that time, I mean, I hadn't felt joy or happiness really in almost 8 years. And it was just such a relief. And in that moment, I was like, I kind of had to stop laughing, and I was just like, wait, either I'm all in or I'm not. Either I go back to my old ways, either I completely like do this or I don't. I can't do this halfway. I can't live a double life. I'm either completely in this for God or I'm not. And I have to make that decision right now. And I reflected on my life. I went through everything that had happened when I was younger and everything. And I was like, yeah, we're going to go the other way. I'm going to go follow God now. And that's what started all of this. Yeah. So that's kind of like the reversion story, I guess you could say.
Wow. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. That is a beautiful story, a beautiful testimony to the power of our Holy Father. Wow, I am so taken back by your story. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate to the journey that you've been on, because unfortunately, it's more common than we like to admit. The details might be slightly different, but so many young women really end up in that space that you were in and walk away from the faith. We see a lot of young people turning from the faith. And we also hear the testimonies of people who have come back and found that. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that. Thank you for your vulnerability.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm happy to share.
You've really built your ministry around your reversion and your story. So talk to us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing right now online and in other ways to support people in your community and to help them grow in their faith as well.
Yeah, I think community is so important. And, we're in the middle of moving right now, so everything's a little bit all over the place. But I will say that one of the things I've really been trying to do, and I kind of had a aha moment in prayer, is when I was in adoration, and I was just like, Lord, I don't know where to take this anymore. Like, I've already shared my story so many times. I've already shared what I've gone through and how to, what more can I bring to this? And if this is the end of the ministry, how do I go about that? Like, what do I do about that? And he was like, no, you're not done yet. Sorry. I know you probably want to be, but you're not. He's just like, mainly what I felt was there is a need for my generation to know how to navigate this life. There are tons of people out there who are talking about their own stories, which is great. And there are tons of people out there talking about apologetics and how to defend the faith, which is great. And all of that's important. But what about those weird niche situations? What about those young adult situations that you find yourself in that nobody can really understand because they're specific to you? And so I have something called the help segment where people email me in about their specific situations, and I can share my experience, but then I also have a spiritual director who is wonderful and has given me so much advice on how to help these people. And I get information from priests and everything on how to address these situations. And so that's something that I've really been trying to lean more into, is what is saturating the secular culture right now, and how is that bleeding into Catholicism and the young Catholics that are trying to navigate the secular world. I have a podcast called A Catholic's Perspective, and my little slogan is all about a young Catholic trying to survive in a secular world. And so I'm like, I really need to take that more seriously and look into what's going on right now, online, offline, in the dating pool, but also in personal lives. I think a lot of stuff is similar, but under different circumstances. Because when I was 11, social media wasn't really a thing, and now it is. So the younger generation are being raised on social media, and what is that costing them spiritually, but also mentally? And how can they handle that? Because when you're a kid, you think your parents know what's best for you. And I assume most parents do try their best, but a lot of parents do fall short. And it's like, well, how do we navigate these things that our parents didn't know how to deal with or don't even know about? And I'm hoping that the ministry and some videos and some podcasts that I'm putting out there will help these specific niche situations in dating. It's like, well, what if I'm dating, a guy and he's lukewarm Catholic, but, he says he's going to get better, but he isn't. Just like very niche situations. I can't think of anything off the top of my head because they're so specific sometimes, but I'm really trying to help the younger generation. I've babysat for one family for almost 10 years at this point, and I've watched them grow up. I've seen how social media has affected them, how COVID affected them when they were younger, and the struggles that they're going through. I'm like, you should not know about any of this as a 9-year-old, or you shouldn't be going through this as a 9-year-old. One of the girls, she often writes on random pieces of paper throughout the house, and I came across a piece of paper, and at this point, she was probably, I want to say, maybe 9 or 10. And she basically talked about how she longed for a simpler time, how she longed for a time when her parents didn't have high expectations. She's 9. Didn't have high expectations of her. She longed for a time when her mom used to brush her hair and her dad used to sit on the couch with her and watch movies and not have any expectations of her. And it makes her sad. And I read this and I was just like, okay, there is a problem here. Like, she was already feeling nostalgic, and she's 9. She's not even a teen yet. She's not even in the double digits. And I'm like, what is going on? So I'm really, really trying to reach the younger kids who are being fed all this, just secular crap that that they should be introduced to pornography, that sex doesn't mean anything, that they can sell their bodies online, that this is a normal type of relationship. Because I see it a lot, and it's really, really sad.
I think you bring up a really good point too, because we've seen some studies recently that are kind of showing the younger generation almost trending back to like non-smartphones, flip phones. They want to, wait, I don't want to be online. I want to be in real life. And so
Yeah.
we are seeing little incremental movements among the young people because I think they sense something's not right and they long for something that maybe they've never even experienced because their whole life technology has been there, but they sense that technology has driven them away from what is better and what is good. And ultimately, they're really seeking a deeper relationship with our Lord, but, in community and connection with real humans. So I'm glad to see there's sparks of hope out there that this generation is waking up and seeing that. And your story about the girl writing the note, I think is symbolic to that as well, because we're hearing those kind of stories all the time. So there's an awakening happening, and I'm excited to see that because I think technology it does have its good moments, and we use it to have these podcast conversations and to get the word out about your ministry. But there are some evil, dark things happening in the technological space, and pornography is one of those things, and it's poisoning our young people. So I'm grateful you shared that story. And I love how you're really taking people's stories at an individual level because it shows them I'm seen, I'm heard, and then you can direct them to really where the answers lie, which is in God's word and in his loving support. So I love that. Theo, I bet you've got questions. I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, everything you said was right. I think, Amber, one of the things that we admire about you is your willingness to kind of take on all the topics. There hasn't been any sacred cows or anything you seem to have avoided. Obviously, pornography, right? You're here, and you've promoted us, so you're here. But even dating, modesty, the occult. I mean, nothing from what I've seen in your videos has seemed to be off the table. You kind of already answered one of the questions in my mind. I love your kind of direction you're going, where you want to answer specific things. I was wondering if there's anything that seems to kind of come up more regularly, or like, any trends you've noticed in these niche questions, but now they're also very specific. But I guess I want to combine two kind of things into one here. I want to ask maybe what are some of the ways of handling certain topics that you found to be effective. And then since you're wanting to appeal to the younger generation, as do we tend to do that a lot by getting to the parents. So what do you think parents need to know to kind of be able to do what you're doing for their kids, if that all makes sense?
Yeah, I think especially with the younger generation, the number one thing that I get is about friendships and about how they've realized that their faith is really important to them, but their friends have taken a completely detour route. And these are people who have been friends for years and years and years. But it's like, well, what do I do if my friend's becoming hostile towards my faith? We've been friends for years, but all of a sudden it's just this 160 and I'm heartbroken and I don't know what to do. And it really does have to do a lot with relationships and whether that's, dating or friendships. But I've noticed that there is a huge influx of also people just not knowing how to interact with each other properly. We've lost the art of communication. We've lost the art of argument, where it's like an argument is always this negative thing nowadays. But in the old days, like you could argue with someone where it's like you could have differing opinions, still respect each other, and still be able to move on and be friends after it. It's not this, I'm cutting my family off for Thanksgiving. It's, that we have these days. So I definitely see a lot of it, most people with relationships, whether that's parent relationship where the child wants to convert, the parent wants to kick them out, or, whatever it might be. That's a huge one right now, actually. Or it might be, dating, like how do I find somebody in this world where it's like sometimes Catholics aren't even Catholic. They say they are, but they're not sometimes. And they're fine with sex outside of marriage, or they're fine doing pushing the boundaries a little bit. And then of course, friendships where like we had all this stuff in common. I started taking my faith more seriously. They didn't. And now it feels like, they're my enemy. So those are like the top ones that I've been seeing as relationships. And for parents, I mean, there is a lot going on. And I think the most important thing that I tell parents is that if you don't teach your kids, the world will. And that goes for anything. That can go for sex. that can go for virtue, that can go for jobs and your worth. And for me, I never had the sex talk. I never had, I figured all of this out on my own. I also taught myself how to read and write. So I was very much so, my parents don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to go off on my own and, find my own answers, because I was just raised in that mindset where it's like fend for yourself kind of thing. You have to figure it out for yourself. And so I did. And I got deep in a lot of trouble because I didn't have guidance. I didn't have the bumpers keeping me from falling into, the dangers of the world. And the only bumpers I had were the Catholic Church, though I didn't know it at the time. And when those were taken away, I was just free to be a gutter ball, basically. And that's what happened. And so I tell parents, I'm like, do not be afraid of these hard conversations. You are the parent. You have a duty to protect your child. And you have a duty to protect them online and offline. And so you have to be able to have these hard conversations with them. And whether or not they take it in the moment, they will hopefully, when they're older, understand, or when they're faced with a situation like this. I think the worst thing that happened was, for me at least in these situations, is that I was blamed a lot for what happened. It's like, well, you should have known better. You should have this, and that, whatever. And so instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, this is, we'll do something about this, or, instead of being I guess having a safe space to be able to tell an adult, any adult, what was happening behind the scenes, I did not have that. I didn't have one adult in my life who I felt like I could go to and be like, this is happening to me. What do I do? Everybody kind of just brushed me off, or I was blamed for it. So I implore parents to have patience with their children, to not go into it judging them, or, yelling at them or anything. Like, of course there needs to be a discussion, but I think parents can become very emotional when they learn their child's hurt. And I think it can come from a very good place, but the child needs, support. They need discussion. They need an open space. They don't need, sometimes the fact that that something's bad is punishment enough. My husband and I talk about this all the time. It's like, sometimes just the act of doing something and coming to your parent knowing that you've done something wrong and telling them you've done something wrong is punishment enough. And what that child really needs is a hug, I mean, I could have benefited from a hug like so many times as a child. So I would say to parents, have patience with your child, for real.
That's good advice. I think that's really important. I know, as a mom myself, my daughter's 26 now, and the best part of her being at that age is we can reflect on her journeys as a young person, because technology came out when she was, I think, maybe in like late middle school, and she didn't get a phone right away. And she was so bitter towards us because we wouldn't let her have technology. And now that she's older, she's like, thank you. Like, thank you for being that parent and sticking it out, even though I said I didn't like you guys. You were so mean, all these things, because she knows now the dangers that are there. And it, to all of our parents out there, it's not easy. I understand, like, keeping up with what's happening in the technological space, or, the cyberbullying, the sexting, all the things that happen that we didn't have access to as young people. We don't understand them. It's hard, but just because something's hard doesn't give us the right to not do our very best to figure it out and to be there for our children. So, let's do better, parents. I mean, we can. There's tools like Covenant Eyes. Protect Young Eyes is a great organization that keeps you in tuned. There's people we can actually refer our children to listen to. People like Amber, healthy podcasts and YouTubes and TikTok videos, people that we want our children to emulate. But we have to be engaged. We need to know who our children are listening to, because Amber, you're a great, amazing person.
Thank you.
But there are a lot of bad actors out there. There are people who claim to be in the faith and are misdirecting our young people, or just have bad theology and they don't even know it. We have to know who our children are listening to and following. In my day, it was my parents needed to pay attention to the music I was listening to. But nowadays, it's who are your kids listening to on podcasts and YouTube and TikTok and all the rest, right?
If you hold the line while they're teenagers, I was late to the game with the phones too. Okay, my parents made sure I didn't, and I didn't always like it. I noticed it's not like everybody else, but you hold the line. And one thing that Karen and I can witness to is that your kids will stay in relationship with you as they're older, right? You have a great relationship with your daughter. I have a great relationship with my parents now that I'm 31. It pays dividends long term.
Yeah, it's really hard in the beginning, but I think the parents who cave, they realize oh no, I've made a mistake, and the parents who don't cave and they give their kids the freedom to feel their feelings, to be upset within reason, because sometimes kids these days can go a little crazy.
No.
Never.
But, you have to, you definitely have to walk them through this. And teenagers are emotional. They're gonna try and guilt you. They're gonna try, because in that moment, it feels so real. It really does, to feel left out, to not have a phone, to not be able to do all these other things your friends are doing. But then, you kind of look at it. And when I was kind of talking to the girls that I babysat for 10 years, the oldest got a phone, and her completely changed. Her entire demeanor has completely changed. And I talked to the younger siblings and I was like, do you see what technology and what social media can do? And they're just like, yeah, we miss our sister. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden she's obsessed with how she looks. She's on her phone all the time. She's not talking to us. She's more moody. And so I've had talks with, the oldest one as well. And she just breaks down all the time, just about I don't know why this person's not texting me back. I don't know if I did something. Is this okay to post? And their parents are very similar to what I had growing up, with adult figures, where it's they don't feel safe going to them. So it's it's unfortunate because, they build these walls and it just becomes a bigger problem, and I do what I can to make the parents aware, because that is my responsibility. But, you can't do anything if the parents don't do anything. I'm just a babysitter.
Yeah. I think too, for parents out there that might be feeling a little bit wow, this is a lot, I don't know how to do all this. The thing is that we are going to make mistakes, but if we can actually just humbly go to our kids when we know that we have let them down, or maybe we weren't there when we should have been there. I mean, that the best parents are going to fail in some way, and just admitting that to your children and letting them know, I don't know everything. And sometimes I make mistakes and I think I let you down and I'm sorry, and asking their forgiveness really can go far to building trust with your kids, because I know as a mom, I made mistakes, and really when you humble yourself and you admit those and you just ask them for, some grace and let them know that we're on this journey together and I'm learning as I go as well, I think that can go really far. So if you're a parent that maybe did give the phone and maybe you have some regrets, there's still a way forward. You can still go to your child and be like, maybe we made a little bit of a mistake here. I want to kind of walk this back, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry if this has harmed you in any way, and I want to make this right, and I'm here for you. And, you mentioned just a hug. Sometimes a hug can really go a long ways, right?
It really can. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of today's episode, Amber, and I want to make sure that all of our listeners can get connected with you and find you in all your social spaces so that they can follow your work. So where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, which is where I upload a lot of videos about what's going on for young adults in the secular world. I try to take a funny spin on it too, so it's really entertaining and also, informative, so it can keep the, Gen Alpha's attention span in there, because my attention span's not very good either. But I get entertained when I edit them, so I'm like, this is good. This is a good thing. And then I also have a podcast called A Catholic's Perspective, and you can basically follow me on any social media platform. I'm on Instagram, X, Facebook, LinkedIn for some reason, and yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's awesome. We'll put all those links in the show notes for our listeners that might be at the gym or driving. We know how hard that is to try to type that in while you're doing something else. So no worries there. We've got your back. Well, Theo, thanks again for joining us today. I hope that you found a lot of value in today's conversation. I know I did.
I definitely did too. It was great to get connected with the religious hippie and hear about this. And I'm a parent of a 3-year-old, right? So I have a lot to learn. So I've definitely had some things I can take back even to my own parenting, but also, man, our generation, Amber and I are kind of in the same generation, so we got a lot of work to do evangelizing the fellow members of our generation, our fellow Catholics and non. And we're just great to have you on the podcast, Amber. Thank you for promoting us. Thank you for sharing the good word and speaking the word of truth into all of these different topics, these topics that are so on the ground and involved with people's lives. Just thanks for everything you're doing. And it's an honor to have you on today and to be connected with you and do the work alongside you. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the work that you guys are doing as well, because our generation needs it and it's so important. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning into this episode of the Covenant Eyes podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care. God bless.